The other area of major concern, the third front of attack I refer to as the military front, where this is all connected. I mean, there's been an increase in military presence in the region around Venezuela, U.S. military presence. I don't know about Canadian. If Canadian is involved with the United States in any of those exercises, that would be interesting to find. They probably are, right? Yeah. Well, then that's important. The United States maintains military bases throughout Latin America, more than 15 of them. And they've been increasing the presence on a lot of these bases over the past year and a half, specifically the ones around Venezuela. So, for example, right off the coast of Venezuela, you know, Venezuela's a Caribbean nation, and it's also Andean and borders Colombia, borders Brazil, it's Amazonian. But on the Caribbean part, right above, literally like right there, I mean, it's 10 minutes in a little private airplane or 30 minutes on a boat or something, fast boat, are the Dutch islands, Curaçao, Aruba, Bonaire. So on Curaçao and Aruba, the U.S. maintains military bases, Air Force bases. Curaçao is actually larger, and on Curaçao they've been building it up over the past year and a half. In Bush versus Chavez, I have a chapter dedicated to Curaçao. I spent a lot of time investigating there last year because the first semester of 2006, the U.S. together with probably Canada and NATO countries conducted all these war exercises. And they used Curaçao as sort of the base for that. So it's literally right off the coast of Venezuela, and the U.S. and all their other collaborators brought down, you know, some nuclear submarines just floating around there in the waters, and warships, aircraft carriers, more than 85 combat planes on board, 6,500 Marines just floating around. You know, and allegedly they're conducting these military exercises. One of them was centralized on responding to hypothetical threat of terrorism in the region, right? And here they are classifying Venezuela as not fully collaborating with the war on terror. Scary. Venezuela complained about it, you know, said this is an intimidation and a threat, and the response was, no, those are routine military exercises, and we're just staying around there for some R&R, some rest and relaxation and recreation, whatever. Right. Actually, the level of military power and those exercises hadn't been conducted in this region since the Cold War. One of the exercises actually took place on Curaçao, where it was called Joint Caribbean Lion, and it was the NATO forces and primarily the U.S. And what they did was simulated exercise. On the island of Curaçao is a terrorist rebel leader, and we have to go capture him. So they go. This literally took place. I mean, I talked to the people in Curaçao were telling me, yeah, and they all came, and the soldiers came, you know, real soldiers, and they come on the island. They secure the hospitals and the telecommunications towers and all the strategic areas of government and everything. You know, secure everything first, then capture the terrorist leader. They capture him, of course, it's their hypothetical. But the name of the terrorist rebel leader was Hugo Legrand, was the name that they gave him in the exercise, right? Hugo the Great. Yeah. Not Hugo Chavez, but, well, really, this is true story. I'm not making that up. As hard as it is to believe. Right? So this has all happened. So, you know, and a lot of people say, no, that can't happen. No invasion of Venezuela. That's ridiculous. I mean, the Colombian border, what's Colombia? A country occupied by U.S. forces. Plan Colombia, you know, it's a country very permissive also in terms of U.S. occupation. Venezuela's border with Colombia is a very hot, tense area. There's a lot of cross-border activity. You know, yes, there is drug trafficking. There's the push of paramilitaries into Venezuelan soil, Colombian guerrillas. You know, it's an area that's very difficult to control. Venezuela has increased their efforts to control and monitor that area, but it's very difficult. And this conflict is being pushed further and further into Venezuela to justify, of course, the furthering of U.S. Forces into Venezuelan territory. There's a base right off the Apure state of Venezuela, southeastern, where, and the Colombian side, in the town of Saravena, this has been amped up substantially over the past 2 years. And in fact, it's a whole area just occupied by the United States. They're using it as a base to initiate like spying missions and things like that on Venezuela. Tons of paramilitaries, thousands have been infiltrated, even up to the area of Caracas. The figure that we know, or the last one I knew, is over 3,000 Colombian paramilitaries are in the metropolitan area of Caracas. That's scary. I actually interviewed one for Bush versus Chavez, and what he had left them, the paramilitaries, and was requesting refuge in Venezuela. And what he said was they had come on a mission, and we know this because a few years ago, 100 of them were caught in a plot to assassinate Chavez, and they were tried, some were deported. This got up to actually the highest levels of Colombian government were involved, and President Uribe had to apologize for this, that they were in this plot to assassinate Chavez. And what the paramilitary told me is that they were there on missions to assassinate Chavez and other political figures. And the way that the Colombian paramilitary, they're mercenaries. They stay till they complete their mission. So that's also another very scary aspect. Venezuela, threat? What do you guys think? Threat? Threat, exactly, to who? Threat to United States empire, economic interests? Yes. I would say for 3 reasons. One, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves, literally, of any country in the world, of any one nation. Not more than the region of the Middle East, but more than any one nation. More than 300 billion barrels of oil in the Fajo Orinoco, the river basin of the Orinoco River in the southeastern part of Venezuela. The level of consumption in the United States of energy, more than 30% of world energy resources, 5% of the population of the world, is unsustainable. It's actually literally destroying and depleting everything on the planet. Unsustainable for another century, if even half a century. But they definitely would need those 300 billion barrels of oil in Venezuela to sustain it. And Venezuela is not cutting off that oil. They maintain the Citgo gas chain company and 7 refineries in the United States. That's 14,000 gas stations, 7 refineries. The U.S. still being the largest trading partner of Venezuela. You know, it's the closest also supplier of oil. No threat yet, but certainly those 300 billion barrels aren't just going to go to the United States. The priority now, people of Venezuela, Latin America. Venezuela is diversifying its clientele, making deals with China, other countries around the world. So in the long term, a threat, absolutely, to a model that's completely unsustainable anyway, but doesn't matter. You know, the U.S. isn't slowing down its consumption, it's actually increasing. The second reason I would say is because of Venezuela's very effective foreign policy. You know, a foreign policy based on Latin American integration, cooperation, not exploitation. So what have we seen over the past, well, since Chavez won office in '98, a complete shift to the left. More than 70% of countries in Latin America that have elected presidents that may not be as radical to the left as Chavez or Evo Morales in Bolivia or Rafael Correa in Ecuador, or even who's back in power in Nicaragua, the same one they used $1 billion and a decade and death squads to oust in the 1980s, Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas. That was a waste of all that money and effort. So, you know, this major shift in terms of governments, but also the actual programs and policies that have been implemented. You know, Venezuela actually 2 weeks ago announced that it has paid off its debt with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. It's 0. It's an extraordinary achievement. And now has spearheaded the creation of the Banco del Sur, the Bank of the South. That's going to be a bank that's going to be actually inaugurated, or the beginning commenced on June 25th or 26th, so just a month away. Created by Latin American nations, funded by Latin American nations for Latin American nations, but not loans that are going to be like IMF loans, you know, exploitative and all these high interest rates. Cooperative, beneficial, mutually beneficial based, and that type of policy, based on cooperation and solidarity. Other efforts, Telesur, the television of the South, you know, combating CNN's influence, for example, throughout Latin America, CNN en Español, and other stations, media monopolies, corporate media. Telesur is an initiative of different countries in Latin America from the eyes and the voices of Latin Americans. Now being seen in different countries throughout Latin America and the world via internet, but in certain countries they have it on their public signal, or cable or satellite. Other initiatives, the Union of the Community of South American Nations, UNASUR, was also just announced in Venezuela there was a summit that took place there in April of South American nations, an energy summit, and 12 nations have now ratified and joined UNASUR, the Union of South American Community of Nations. This is extraordinary. I mean, this is now expanding, for example, Mercosur, the market of the South, the southern cone of South America, of which Venezuela is a member. Then there's the Community of Andean Nations, the Andean region, and to bring them all together as a union of South American nations. A major blow to U.S. domination in the region. You know? So this is definitely Venezuela's effective foreign policy and leadership is chipping away at that that illegal Monroe Doctrine concept of Latin America backyard of the United States. No longer is. That's over. The third area where I would say Venezuela is a threat, and probably one of the most powerful, is the model that's being developed in Venezuela. A model that's based on prioritizing people's interests and needs over economic profits, but that's prosperous also economically as well as socially and humanly. Healthy economically, healthy humanly, right? Using, obviously, the nation's wealth to invest in social programs, eradicating illiteracy in a 2-year period, building clinics, medical clinics in poor neighborhoods throughout the entire country, and not just poor neighborhoods, large diagnostic treatment centers in wealthy areas and middle-class areas in every area to attend to all the people in the country. And again, not just your regular checkup, but full-on surgery for free, whatever you need. The largest cardiovascular children's hospital in the world was built in Venezuela just last year, inaugurated. And it provides free attention to anybody around the world. You know, initiatives that are being helped, that one in particular with Cuba, in an agreement, another agreement, trade agreement, an alternative, Bolivarian alternative for the Americas, an alternative to Free Trade of the Americas Act, that's based on solidarity and mutual cooperation. Bolivia, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Ecuador are part of this so far. It probably will expand. 19,000 Cuban doctors working in Venezuela in all those clinics and providing expertise and knowledge to help build the new technologically advanced diagnostic treatment centers and others. And why? A lot of people say, but why all those Cuban doctors? Because Venezuelan doctors refuse to go into poor neighborhoods and take care of the people, and certainly not for free. Forget that. Now this is changing because now there's a Latin American medical school in Venezuela being built, and Venezuelans that have been sent to, there's one also in Cuba, for medical training that are now incorporating themselves into these missions, these healthcare missions. Other areas, not just being dependent for that economic prosperity on the oil industry, because of course that's a dangerous thing to just be dependent on that, and certainly then that couldn't be used as a model for other countries that don't have 300 billion barrels of oil, but diversifying the economy, one, through cooperatives. Tens of thousands of cooperatives have been created in Venezuela over the past few years, bringing the economy down to more of a local level, social production companies that have been built, worker controlled, trying to ensure that communities have sufficient work. It's a right in the Constitution. Jobs, work, industries that invest back into their communities. So all these initiatives are taking place now in Venezuela under this new model that's being built right now as we speak. I mean, everything is in motion down there. It's revolution happening. That's what it is, transformation of the economic and social and political structure entirely. This is a major threat to the United States as promoting capitalism and that capitalist democracy as the best democracy in the world and the only one that can lead to prosperity. I mean, that's what they say is, well, yes, there will have to always be poor for there to always be rich and prosperity, right? That kind of rich. And Venezuela is trying to make another model that's saying, in fact, there's a major ambitious objective, but it's the principal objective of the Chavez government. Eradicate poverty entirely by 2021. Eradicate poverty by 2021. That's a huge goal. But so far, 30% of extreme poverty has been reduced. 30%. That's pretty good, especially considering all these sabotage and aggressions and destabilization, economic, $10 billion in damages to Venezuela's economy in 2003, and today it's the fastest growing economy in Latin America. So, I think that it's really important for people around the world to take a stand on these issues. One, because in the end, this isn't just about Venezuela. What's happening in Venezuela is serving as an inspiration and hope for peoples around the world, which means responsibility for Venezuelans. A lot of responsibility, to have a very sincere commitment to the revolution that's being built and to set that example for others around the world. But also that the revolution in Venezuela, which is about social justice in the end, it's about the future of humanity, right? We're talking about two models, an empire that it really is. It's not just Washington. It's multinational corporations. It's an economic world elite that is literally destroying the world in every way. The planet, the people, humanity. These models are confronting right now, and the world is at war. There's a war being waged. Very serious war happening, you guys know that. But a lot of people don't, especially in the United States. They're oblivious to a lot of stuff that's happening. And that this is now, it's true, it's even scarier. These models are conflicting. And there's really no time, with war happening in the world, with not even another century or half a century of time left to maintain these models of consumption, the energy consumption. People have to take a stance. There's no more time for ambiguity. You're either on the path to saving, defending humanity and the planet, or destroying it. That's it. There's really no in between. Venezuela right now we're at a point where they're demonizing Chavez. They're taking all these steps in terms of media and diplomatically to isolate Venezuela, very similar to cases that we've seen happen before, like Iraq, for example, where all these similar things happened before the invasion took place. It's happening with Iran. In the terms of U.S. Public opinion, ask about Iran, everybody would probably agree to some kind of invasion there in the United States, because it's already been so demonized effectively in the media. In the case of Venezuela, it's really similar. In the United States, there are 2 video games have been released over the past 2 years. One called Mercenaries 2 and the other Rainbow Six, where the video game is you play, big, strong, powerful mercenary or whatever, savior of the world, and you're charged with going into Venezuela, invading with your team, these big military experts, and taking out the tyrant and rescuing the oil industry. That's what the games are about. And you go in and you see the images that, they've got, all these animated. You can see them on the internet. You go in and you shoot at people, and one of them, the people are all wearing red shirts, color of the revolution in Venezuela, right? And in others, it's literally, it's talks right out about the leftist tyrant dictator, blah, 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 all this stuff, save it. What is that? That's psychological preparation. I remember when I was finishing college in the beginning of, in 1990, and they were doing this with Iraq, First Gulf War in Iraq. Same thing, psychological preparation. So it's happening right now, and it's very important, to get involved, to take a stance, to combat media manipulation. When you see that stuff in your papers, that one the people talked about, they're not here anymore, but about the free newspaper, find out who publishes that, write letters to them, combat that. That's got to stop. Got to take initiatives. It can be effective. Sometimes people think that's not effective, but writing letters to your editor can be very effective. Thanks a lot.
Sí, se puede hacer preguntas. Sí. Ahí tenemos 45 minutos.